The Simpsons Golden Age. When talking about The Simpsons and its 30-year legacy, this concept always looms over the conversation. The newest episodes measured against the golden years. However, with any fandom-related topic, there continues to be a debate surrounding The Simpsons Golden Age, as it can vary wildly from person to person. So that makes me wonder, what exactly is the Golden Age of The Simpsons? When did it occur? And, well, is the Golden Age even real? Before we go further down this fandom rabbit hole, let's try to define what a golden age of a TV show is. The whole topic is extremely nebulous and subjective, so let's at least try to get on the same page about what we're talking about. Generally speaking, when people refer to a TV show's golden age, it refers to the period where the show's output was at its strongest. The critical reception, the fandom reception, you could even factor in the show's ratings and general pop culture footprint into making this determination. For more serialized shows with a rotating cast, a golden age can refer to a specific combination of characters. Often, a show's golden age arrives early in its run, as the show is still building itself up, although this is not necessarily mandatory. Usually the term Renaissance is used when there is a late series improvement. In addition to the quality level, there is a time element in this equation. You can't call something a golden age when all you're really talking about is one or two really good episodes of a show. That only works if there are only 5 episodes total and 2 of them are really, really good. You're typically talking about a period of time where the show is at its best, cranking out one gem after another. Now, a golden age does not preclude the series from having dud episodes during it. Even at a show's best, sometimes it will churn out something subpar. In addition, the idea of a golden age does not automatically mean that there are no good episodes outside that era. There is a consistency factor that should be considered. Not only is the show producing good episodes, but they are doing so at a consistent rate. Now, the tricky thing about The Simpsons is that it's a status quo show. It's not like The Office, for example, where some fans might say that the Steve Carell seasons are all the golden age, and that when he left, that's when it ended. Or they'll cut it down further, and say that the golden age ended when, say, Jim and Pam got married. Or they'll say it started in season 2 with the Dundies. I'm in that camp, by the way. With The Simpsons, you have considerably less to latch onto. A character like Maude Flanders could be killed, but is the argument that this is the end because Maude is gone? Is she that important? That Maude Flanders was the pillar of classic Simpsons, gosh darn it. When you're making the Maude Flanders argument, you're usually saying that this is emblematic of how the show lost its way, that this is a pattern of behavior. After all, the show prides itself on how it bucks continuity and refreshes from zero at the beginning of every story. That's why I'm against the idea that a single episode was the downfall of The Simpsons. I think that's the biggest crock of bullshit in Simpsons fandom history, to be honest. If you hate Season 9, just say you hate Season 9. Jeez. We don't have to put it all on the shoulders of poor Principal Skinner. I don't want to get further into the weeds yet of defining what's golden and what's not, but you have an idea how messy figuring out is. Since Simpsons fans are often making a strictly qualitative argument, there's not going to be a definitive answer. Everyone is different and wonderful, and will have their biases and preferences that shape them. So in trying to define when The Simpsons Golden Age is, all we can really do is look at the general consensus and pick out individual trends. Which seasons are part of The Simpsons Golden Age? Okay, first, let's do a quick rundown of the different showrunner eras of The Simpsons as a refresher, just since we're going to be name-dropping them a bunch. The first 2 seasons were showrun by the trio of Matt Groening, James L. Brooks, and Sam Simon. Then in seasons 3 and 4, the duo of Al Jean and Mike Reiss took over. Then when they departed, they brought in David Merkin to run seasons 5 and 6. After that, they promoted writing duo Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein for seasons 7 and 8. Then Mike Scully took over for 9 through 12, with 9 having a handful of episodes run by all the previous showrunners. Then in season 13, Al Jean returned and ran things all the way through present day, with Matt Selman showrunning the majority starting in season 33. There's a lot of smaller nuances in here, and obviously there are many writers who had great influence over the seasons they worked on, but this is the very simplified, top-down summary of the various eras. From being on the internet for a while, I've seen so many different takes on which seasons are the Golden Age and which aren't, but I wanted to see what the current feeling is on the subject. So, I decided to ask everyone. I created a poll asking to select which seasons they thought were part of The Simpsons Golden Age and sent it to my YouTube and Twitter followers. I ended up getting over 3,600 responses, wow. Now, from a methodology standpoint, it's worth noting that there is a ton of sample bias here. I'm asking people who specifically follow me on YouTube or Twitter, our take on The Simpsons isn't going to represent the whole population. Anyway, here are the results. As you can see, the general consensus appears to be strongest for seasons 3 through 8, spanning the Gene and Reese, David Merkin, and Oakley and Weinstein years. Seasons 4 through 7 were most popular, all polling above 90%, with season 6 being peak of the mountain. I want to meet these 5% of people who are so anti-season 6. I bet they have an interesting perspective. Seasons 3 and 8 are equally popular in the poll, interestingly enough. Season 3 sometimes gets booted for being a little slower paced than the later years. People into the more rapid-fire gag-driven later years might not be apt to include Season 3. And Season 8 is occasionally excluded because some fans feel a sense of fatigue setting in, especially in the back half of that season. There's some divisive episodes here, and it could be argued that certain trends originated around this time. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised how well Season 8 did in this poll. It's always had its share of detractors, but time has clearly been kind to it. Simpsons fandom has always had an odd relationship with Season 1. I think that's true for most TV shows, that first season being the weird one where they're working out the kinks. With its rougher animation and its different comedic style and pacing, it's a fairly popular fan opinion that Season 2 is when The Simpsons gets good. Some fans even suggest skipping it to new viewers. Typically, the biggest points of contention with Simpsons fans are whether to include Seasons 2 and 9. 3 through 8 is the generally accepted Golden Age, but some fans like to tack on Season 2 at the beginning, Season 9 at the end, or both. 2 through 9 is a fairly common opinion, for example. The quote-unquote problem with Season 2 is that it's so dang schmaltzy, which isn't for everyone. From a jokes and pacing perspective, it doesn't feel much like those later seasons. It does have some super popular and acclaimed episodes, like Bart Gets an F and Lisa's Substitute, which some folks would want to put in their golden years. Season 9 is certainly the elephant in the room, easily the most divisive year in Simpsons history. I mean, it polled at nearly 50%. How much more split can a fan base be? Some fans absolutely love Season 9 and think it's about on par as Season 8. There are indeed a ton of very popular and iconic episodes in Season 9. Other fans don't think it's nearly as good, but is still solid enough to be the final year of the Golden Age. Whereas other Simpsons fans think it's too hit or miss overall, or falls off considerably in its second half. Some of the more controversial episodes of Season 9 make it a good cutoff point for others. And some might just not be into Mike Scully. After that, we get our bell curve downward all the way to Season 20. About 30% of the respondents went all the way to Season 10, and there's probably a decent overlap with the Season 1 crowd. These Season 1 through 10 voters are clearly the most even-handed Simpsons fans, giving each showrunner 2 years of the Golden Age. There were some votes that came in all the way up to Season 20. About 1 to 2% of Simpsons fans voted for these later years. The question itself is a little biased, assuming there is a Simpsons Golden Age and asking people to pick. But clearly, there is a subsection of Simpsons fans who reject that framing and consider all or most of the first 20 seasons golden. Writers and producers of The Simpsons themselves have argued against that narrative as well. We as Simpsons fans have constructed the idea of there being a Golden Age, but just because a bunch of fans reach a consensus doesn't mean it's valid. There are so many delusional fan bases on the internet. Is the Simpsons Golden Age actually real? Or are we winding ourselves up for no reason? Over the years, Simpsons writers have done plenty of interviews, and this is a topic that comes up from time to time. And we have gotten plenty of quotes and arguments striking back against that fandom narrative. In 2007, Matt Groening said this to the Los Angeles Daily News. "You always hear that the show isn't as good as it used to be, but people always compare the new shows to the memories of their favorite episodes, back when the show surprised them. You've got to have an open mind, and for some people, it's impossible. Nostalgia clouds their thinking." In a 2020 AV Club interview, Al Jean expressed similar sentiments. "It's very hard to compete with something they saw when they were 10 years old. I remember when I was 10, reading Spider-Man comics with Steve Ditko, the artist. And it's hard for anything to compare to those because you're a kid and you're discovering it." I think many would agree that the rose-colored glasses effect tends to be a real thing in human psychology. That the first Simpsons episodes you would view, especially when you were in your formative years, you're going to have an extra sense of reverence for them. There's both a novelty and nostalgia factor in early Simpsons favor. You think back to an episode like Homie the Clown, and think about the all-time great moments, like this one, and this one, and this one. You don't really think about those weird references to Tom Bosley, Chachi, and Starsky and Hutch that don't really land. You don't question whether this ending is too arch and silly to be satisfying. I frickin' love Homie the Clown. I think it's a great episode. That's why I picked it for this example. When you're thinking of something you consider good, it's easy to hand-wave away any of those potential points of criticism. Can we totally disqualify a modern Simpsons episode for being too silly about its plot resolution when Homie the Clown was behaving similarly in Season 6? Was Homie the Clown the start of bad Simpsons writing? Obviously, I'm being glib when I ask that. That's just the kind of critical lens we often use when evaluating media, especially when something is brand new. We like Homie the Clown, so we are more apt to say that it earned that silly ending. I think, to some degree, Matt Groening and Al Jean are correct about human nature. That when evaluating a new Simpsons episode, it is easy to inadvertently compare it to an idealized memory rather than the old episode itself. We should also remember that, even in the so-called golden age of The Simpsons, the early internet fandom was not at all on the same page about its greatness. Al Jean, in that same interview, said this. "Back then, when the 4th season was airing, I was there and people were sort of dismissive of it. I remember people going, 'Oh, The Simpsons has gotten too silly, it's lost its way. What's this monorail show?' A lot of people didn't like the monorail show at first. And now you say, as I've heard, that people voted it the best ever. So I think you can't judge relatively what episodes are better or worse based on what people react to now." This is a very extreme example, given the popularity of Marge vs. the Monorail. However, thanks to archivists, we do have some of the receipts from alt.tv.simpsons. If you've never gone to the Simpsons archive to read the review section of their episode guides, I strongly recommend checking them out. I've considered doing a whole video about them, they are so dang interesting. The review sections start being archived in Season 5, and you can already tell that opinions were mixed. Here are 3 reviews from the Conan O'Brien classic, Homer Goes to College.
Don't get me wrong, I really liked Cape Fear, and the B-Sharps was kind of good in a weird way, but the college episode was the worst Simpsons episode I've ever seen. I've loved every other episode. I'm not at all critical when I watch, but what happened? Are there new writers? I'm embarrassed. I've gotten so many people into this show, and now I look stupid.
I found this episode to be utterly devoid of any plot, and there were extremely few funny parts. I normally laugh hysterically at least once during an OFF episode, but not this week. I sincerely hope the quality of these shows improve, else I might just have to only watch each episode 3 times.
After watching the last 3 episodes, I have realised that the show sucks now. Oh, it's not easy for me to say that, but come on, they're not putting any thought into it anymore. Satire has been replaced with sight gags, the characters are losing their individual personalities, the storylines have become a series of non sequiturs. The whole thing just reminds me of the last season of Moonlighting, and we all know how ugly that got.
Well, I'm gonna say ouch for Moonlighting. Also, big thanks to our 3 guests for reading those cranky reviews. Check them out if you haven't already. Now, obviously, I cherry-picked these examples, as not all the Homer Goes to College user reviews were negative. With the nature of the internet, you're gonna find somebody who absolutely hates every new episode. However, when considering how The Simpsons evolved from showrunner to showrunner, it makes sense that longtime fans would have mixed reactions to these philosophical shifts. Remember, their point of comparison would be Season 2 stuff, like Dancin' Homer and Bart's Dog Gets an F. A zany episode like Homer Goes to College or Homer the Vigilante comes along, and you'd be like, what the hell even is this show anymore? In a commentary, Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein said that they read the old Usenet reviews, would see the negative comments, and even admitted being disappointed that there were still internet cranks when they were running the show in seasons 7 and 8. 95% of fans today say that season 7 is part of the golden age, but back then, there was a perception that The Simpsons were over the hill. These criticisms that kept rolling in from the internet, studio executives, and the media. It got so bad and was such a continuous thing that the series literally made the Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie show in response. That's our smoking gun that this did indeed happen. Its thesis is very clear that they believed the show was as good as ever. It was just the audience's perception that had shifted. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense why the Simpsons writers would feel skeptical about the fans' instant reactions to the new episodes. We internet people are not the most reliable bunch. Maybe instead, we should look at the more measurable reception of The Simpsons over the years. For example, we could look at their Emmy wins for the animated television program over the years. They won in 1990, 91, 95, 97, 98, 2000, 2001, 2003, 2006, and 2008. But after that point, they didn't win again until all the way in 2019 for Mad About the Toy. Award voting is always going to be fickle and kind of stupid in general. You should all hear the audio commentary still grumbling about the time Claymation Easter beat Radiowar to 92. But, given the series suddenly went an entire decade before getting another win, there's only 2 explanations. Either the Emmy voters think The Simpsons declined, or there's so much competition in animation, The Simpsons kept getting shut out. I thought last year's Pixelated and Afraid was one of the strongest Simpsons efforts in quite some time, and even it lost out to Arcane because there's so much excellent animation now. We could also point to declining television ratings over time, but I've never thought that was a great metric. One, because all TV ratings for a series declines over time. Heck, these days TV ratings are such a wasteland, The Simpsons ratings are pretty dang solid. Secondly, since when are ratings an indicator of quality? All the ratings chart demonstrates is that The Simpsons stopped being the hottest thing on the planet, and we all know that happened. See, that's the problem with any Golden Age discussion in general. Like with most artistic endeavors, it's not easily measurable. You look at a series' body of work, do a critical analysis over time, and declare a cutoff point. There are objective facets to television criticism, such as whether the story beats make sense, joke construction, pacing, etc. But artistic taste often gets mixed into the equation. One person's lazy ending is another person's hilarious subversion of convention. We've gotten a sense of when the fans think the Golden Age was, and some counter-arguments by the staff. So, what now? Is The Simpsons just permanently stuck being dogged by its legacy going forward? I've purposely avoided inserting my own opinion too much into this so far, instead summarizing the debate itself. But here's where I land on it. When I created the poll, I personally voted for seasons 1 through 8. Yes, I am one of those people. But you all probably saw that coming with all the season 1 cheerleading I do. At the same time, with all my modern Simpsons cheerleading, it might be surprising that I take a fairly traditionalist stance, that there is indeed a golden age of The Simpsons. I understand why many aren't into Season 1, as it does feel totally different from the later stuff, but for me, I still feel that Simpsons essence to Season 1, that subversive point of view that defines the series, and I think the episodes are strong enough quality-wise to be included. For the end of the golden years, there are a lot of small facets I would point to, explaining what got worse after Season 8. There are a lot of the typical things you've heard before, characterization changes, pointing out the joke too much, cop-out endings, repetitive plot formats, gimmicky guest stars. Even The Simpsons themselves have referenced a bunch of these criticisms. Mostly I tend to exclude the Scully years because I don't find them as balanced as something like the Merkin era. They stretched the rubber band just a little too far and lost something, in my view. But admittedly, even that is more of a taste reason. However, I think time is the main culprit here. Time has always been kind of the villain of The Simpsons, as it has created so many weird issues with the show. Fundamentally, The Simpsons has been on the air for so long, a golden age is inevitable. From both a production side and a fandom side, it has to happen because of human nature. I think Al Jean and Matt Groening are right in a sense about nostalgia, that longtime fans are never going to be able to watch a new Simpsons with totally fresh eyes. But I also don't think that's wrong. The Simpsons chose to continue on for over 30 years, and when making that decision, it comes with a lot of baggage. The series will inevitably repeat itself, putting different spins on tired story concepts. Yes, The Simpsons is a status quo show, but every Homer Lisa episode paradoxically ends up standing on the shoulders of every other Homer Lisa episode. We've seen Lisa the Greek, we've seen Lisa's Pony. It becomes more and more challenging presenting their relationship in a fresh way. The writers will try creative, unconventional spins, and some will fail. In addition, the audience starts recognizing patterns and tendencies, and the show becomes formulaic. After 20 years, we have a sense of what an Al Jean Simpsons episode feels like. We've learned their tricks, understand their sensibilities. I knew when they did that fan contest a while back, they were going to kill off Ricardo Bamba because that's the kind of funny thing that Al Jean would do. You just get to know people after a while, and the same could be said about audiences with their TV shows. Of course, longtime viewers of this YouTube channel probably expected me to say something like that. I've always believed that after a certain point, making a truly great season of TV is harder than the previous one, just because of all the things you've done already. It gets harder continuing to carry that torch, doggedly keeping standards high. I remember when reading John Ortvid's Unauthorized History of the Simpsons book, they were talking about writing during the Oakley and Weinstein years, describing how it had sort of a fraternity vibe, where the writers would stay up super late, trying to get the best possible jokes into their episodes. And there's an anecdote about Sideshow Bob's last gleaming, when working late trying to come up with a name of the general character. Finally, someone came up with a name, Colonel Hap Hapablap, and everyone laughed, but it was kind of a laugh like, this is my life is grains of sand in the hourglass to arrive at Colonel Hap Hapablap, and we were all just kind of laughing at the waste of our lives, I think. But Bill and Josh heard the laughter, and it was contagious. And they were like, Hap Hapablap, Colonel Hap Hapablap. And they just kept saying it, and it was getting funnier and funnier. And that's the name of the guy in the show, Colonel Hap Hapablap. I'm not bringing up this anecdote to slam Bill and Josh for being workaholics. They're honestly my favorite showrunners, and I think it's a minor miracle that seasons 7 and 8 turned out so amazing. They worked themselves to death to give us those seasons. They had the whole deck stacked against them. But you could imagine why that kind of process isn't sustainable long term. Burnout is inevitable, and you can't expect the staff to want to put themselves through that forever. Simpsons writers clearly work hard on every script they do. They shouldn't be on permanent crunch time just to give us the quote-unquote perfect version of season 35, if that's even possible for a season 35 of anything. The Simpsons had a beautiful, magical run-up in the 1990s, where everything they were doing was brand new, bringing adult animation back to primetime TV. It's just an impossible standard to live up to. Those early seasons are when everyone collectively decided, This is what The Simpsons is. This is the show. So when a showrunner takes things in a different direction or tweaks the formula, it can feel like the sky is falling. Just like the writers, fans are also storytellers, constructing narratives about what the show is and what it isn't. Who's to say that the show can't be a wackadoo farce full of jockey elves and chloroform jokes? Who decides that? Is The Simpsons meant to be that inflexible? I'm curious where everyone else lands on this topic, this nebulous golden age that we all agree exists, but can't nail down exactly. It's something fun to argue about, at the very least. At the same time, I don't think The Simpsons Golden Age is a narrative that should dominate the show. I think there's enough room to say that there is a golden age, but also they made plenty of good episodes in the later years. Both statements can be true. However, the one thing The Simpsons should never be is stagnant. We can never return to the golden years, and the writers will never be able to fully recapture them. But as long as they're still trying to change the formula and reinvent themselves, I'll try my best to forget about Season 6. At least for 30 minutes on Sunday night.